Going live. Yep, we are live now. Awesome. It's going to give me a minute. We'll set up. Cool. Welcome everyone to another Civo meetup. I'm really excited for it. And this is our 19th meetup. So really looking forward to this one. And today we have Femin here with us. I believe I pronounced that correctly, who's a developer advocate at Cubesphere. And they are going to basically talk about the observability features of Cubesphere, how it integrates with your favorite tools from multi-dimensional monitoring metrics and all sorts of things around observability. And I'm Kunal. I work as a developer advocate at Civo. I'll be walking you through Cubesphere, what it's for, some of the features, and I'll set up multi-cluster management on it as well. Before we move forward, Femin, would you like to tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's glad to be here. My name is Femin Zhou. I come from Beijing, China, and this is first time to attending the Civo Cloud Civo webinar. Yeah, and I'm CNCF ambassador and the CDF ambassador. Apart from that, I'm a community manager at Cubesphere, and I'm really enjoy advocacy and outreach, and I like technical sharing. So if you have any technical issues or if you are new beginners in the cloud native technologies, feel free to reach out to me, or you can also take a look at our today's webinar.
Amazing. And for folks who are watching, this will be edited and uploaded on YouTube later on. So you can watch it again. And also, folks who are joining us live in Zoom, feel free to share in the chat where you're joining us from. And also, I know it's a little bit early in like the other time zones and a little bit later in other time zones. So that's why we record everything so that folks can watch it later on. We have over 100 plus folks already showed interest for this session, so which is exciting. And if you have any questions, as always, you can use the Q&A section. I'll be answering those questions, and as a host of this meeting, I'll be sharing with them with Femin as well, and we'll be discussing about those. It's cool. I'll do my my talk first, which is a little bit more of an introduction to Cubesphere. Let me just quickly share my screen, close all the unnecessary tabs and everything. Just give me a second. Looking good. Live stream looks good. Cool. And I'm just going to share my screen. I believe you all can see the platform now, the website.
Yeah, I can see it.
Awesome. Before we move forward, I'm just gonna create a cluster on Civo because there are some steps that Cubesphere takes that takes a little bit of time. So I can just add something like Cubesphere demo 2 because I already ran one previously. Default. I'm gonna go to this one. I already have one installed over here. One second. No, I don't think we have to do that one. Let me just see. No, I don't think I have it here. 1 second. Kubernetes. Sorry. Yeah, Cubesphere Civo. And I'll show you how you can make it on your own as well. So what you have to do, you have to go to Kubernetes and you can create a new cluster. When you create a new cluster, you can give it some name. You can say my cluster, firewall and stuff. We'll talk more about it later on. You can select your own tier like this, and then you can go to management and you can find Cubesphere over here. That's all you need to do. And you will be landed on a page like this. Cool. So you can find it under management. It's in the Kubernetes marketplace. Cubesphere is available over here. All right, so that's what we'll talk about today. But before moving forward, let me explain a little bit more about like Cubesphere and why it's what we're doing over here. So as you can see, on the website, it's mentioned that it's a distributed open distributed operating system for cloud native application management, and it uses Kubernetes as its kernel. So it provides like a nice little UI that you can use as a plug and play architecture. It also allows third-party applications, and Kubernetes is extremely like powerful, but it gets a little bit difficult when folks try to add it like in practice. For example, just like Cubesphere, I've seen like so many folks who are trying to make trying to focus more on the dev part of DevOps. So Kubernetes, as complex as it is, platforms like like Cubesphere, as you can see over here, it's making easier for folks to onboard to Kubernetes. And this is where the Cubesphere comes in when we talk about like there are so many different practices, and when it comes to Kubernetes, so it basically makes your life easier when it comes to managing Kubernetes, right? If we talk about some of the features over here, I believe Feynman, you can jump in on it as well. So here you can see how it's going to benefit the infra team, the developers, ops team, and end user. Many of you are like developers, so you can see that you can focus more on the development part and the application part and everything else. You don't have to deal with like the complicated YAML files, if you will. So you can move ahead a little bit more faster. And the ops team, as you can see over here, and end users as well, right? Speaking of the features, as you can see, out of the box CI/CD solutions based with other tools like, so you can see Jenkins over here, service mesh based on Istio, observability, and this is the one that we'll be looking into this session as well, which is Kubernetes multi-cluster management. So just via like just one account, using one account, you'll be having a, I'll explain it later on. I don't want to jump ahead, but we'll basically look how you can do multi-cluster management in Kubernetes with Cubesphere, which I believe is a really, really cool feature. Edge computing platform and all the rest of the things are available over here as well. Less talking, more doing. So I'll jump on the demo right now, but Feynman, would you like to add something to it?
I think it is enough. The introduction looks good to me. Yeah.
Cool. Let's get started. So you already have your cluster created over here. There are some minimum requirements. I believe you need 2 cores of CPU, a little bit like around 4 gigabytes of memory and 40 gigabytes of volume. And also there are certain ports that require to be open that you can also see on the, I believe in the documentation, that it requires some ports for you to be open. So we already talked about that you can go into the marketplace under management, and then you can work with it. If you haven't worked with the Civo CLI, that's fine. I'll just download the kubeconfig and show you via kubectl, but I highly recommend working with the CLI. Export kube config. Okay, and I can just say kubectl logs, this command that I can run, and it's going to show me like the real time of like the logs of the installation. This one should show successful, pretty cool. So this is important because when you run it on your own, it's going to take a little bit of time. It does like a few steps. I think there are 4 steps that it takes or something. There's a bunch of things on the behind, yeah. And that's the beauty of it. Like tools like this provide such abstraction, so you don't have to like deal with all sorts of things. Like we talk about, like I'll show you the UI in just a minute, and Feynman will then show you like how you can work with like the observability features. So you'll see how easy it is for even beginners and new folks to get started, and how it's definitely going to help like businesses speed up with Kubernetes who may find it difficult to get started with. So this is a command that you can use, and it will show you like successful. I can go to the external IP of my cluster over here, and this is the one that is correct. And what is the port? 30880. There we go. Okay, I forgot my password. What was the password that I set? I think I did not change it, so I believe it's the default one only. I hope so. So there's a default password, which is this. I think this should work. Yeah, highly recommend you all to change it. This is just the default one, but you can definitely change it. As you can see, it's on port 30880. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. So when you create your own Kubernetes cluster, please note that these ports should be open. You can manage it under firewall. I have put it on default, like all open, but you can go to firewalls and you can make sure that these ports, if you're using a firewall, that these are open, right? There are a few ports, you can find it in the documentation. But I believe that's it. So this is basically like the UI over here. If I go to the overall view, I can go over here. This is cluster management, access control, and platform settings. Access control has a bunch of features, but I'm going to work on cluster management. And this is something that I already have set up. And this is the example for multi-cluster management. So it's pretty simple. So let's talk a little bit more about like multi-cluster, managing multiple clusters on Cubesphere. So if you're working with Kubernetes and you may have to deal with multiple clusters as a day-to-day routine. So you may have like several clusters that are hosted on like Civo, for example, or some other cloud providers, whatever you prefer. And some may be running in like your local data centers or something like that. So it can be really time consuming to manage all these clusters that are running at all these places one by one. So the idea what Cubesphere is going to follow is that if you have multiple clusters, in this example, 2 for example, then one of these clusters is going to act as a host cluster, and then you can add multiple member clusters. So host cluster is basically going to manage all the other member clusters. I believe that's how it works. Feynman, correct me if I'm wrong. And I think you can only have one host cluster that can manage multiple member clusters. I think that's how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So this is basically going to improve efficiency in multi-cloud and multi-cluster management. I believe it uses Cubesphere federation. And there are like 2 ways by which you can do it. Let me just show you in a second. Multi-cluster management. Cool. Doing multi-cluster management. Yeah, so this is this is how it happens. And there was basically one more, I think, overview. Yeah. I think this is it. Cubesphere federation. There you go. So this is how it works. As I mentioned previously, this is your host cluster, and then there's like n number of member clusters that you want to have. But how does it like actually work? Few pointers. You need to have Cubesphere installed on every cluster, which is something you can do relatively simply using the marketplace, or you can do it by your own as well using the CLI. It's pretty straightforward as well for that. And there are 2 ways by which you can do it. There's a direct connection that you can use, or the agent connection. I'll show you how to use how to set it up with a direct connection. Cool. Let's move forward. As you can see over here, I think I can go into my host, and I can go to CRD. And what was it? Cluster configuration. Is that correct?
Yes.
This one. So you can go over here. There will be a YAML file over here, KS installer. I can edit it. And here, basically, this is the cluster configuration for this cluster, right? I have to tell Cubesphere that this cluster is my host cluster, the host cluster, the image that I showed previously, this one. So I can say cluster management. Where is it? Here you go. So multi-cluster, what is this cluster's role? Well, this is the host cluster. So that is what I have listed over here. Click on OK. And after a while, when you go back to your platform, cluster management, this will be added as host cluster. Pretty straightforward. Cool. Awesome. So now this is going to be added as the host cluster. And same thing, what you can do is you can go to you can go to member cluster, and you can go to member cluster, for example, and you're going to log in via the member cluster. So obviously in the account of member cluster. In this case, what is happening is that I have logged in via this, and this is something that this is another cluster that I created over here in Civo, as you can see. Member. So I can log in over here as well, no problem. It's already available here. 30. What was the password?
I could type it. Yeah, let me type it.
There you go. This is the one. Same thing I have to do. I have to tell that this one. Okay, what?
Are you going to log into the member cluster?
Yeah.
Actually, this might be a bug in the latest version, so we are going to fix it. We have already fixed it in 3.3, so you can
I see.
enter into the member cluster from the host management console. Yeah, you
Yeah,
can click into it.
No worries. So it's basically the same thing. If I go over here, right?
Yeah,
and I go to CRD, I go to cluster config. Then I go edit this. Here, basically, I'll be adding this as member cluster, right? And one more thing you have to keep in mind is this JWT secret token that I have received, right? So if I go into the documentation, so the thing is that this will be basically, if I add the role member over here, now Cubesphere knows that this cluster is going to be used as a member cluster. Okay, no problem. But how is it going to identify the host? So you can do that via this thing, this JWT token. Now, the thing is, how do we get this token? So you can get it via the, like if you go into the host, here we go in the host, I'll just go kubectl. This is also a great feature. You can go into kubectl and type commands and stuff over here. And the JWT command is this one. This is it. Just copy this and paste it in the JWT section. And I believe that's then you're pretty much good to go. The next thing is adding it. And that's the last step. So you go to platform, cluster management, add cluster. You can give it a cluster name and provider and everything. I believe I've already added it. So I can just say, can I add it again? I'm not sure. No, not really. I'll just show it for like demo purpose. Direct connection. And here you can basically get the kube config of this target cluster, right? You can group the kube config. Kube config you can get pretty easily via the Civo dashboard. So member cluster, download the kube config file, copy paste in this particular thing. But there's an important point I'd like to mention about the IP address over here. Member config, copy paste. Believe this particular one, right? This is an important point. So make sure this one is like discoverable via member cluster. You can add like extra internal IP that is like available to your member host one. So this one should be available by the host one, right? So please make sure of this. Since this is like the external one, so it will work just fine. Then you click on create, and that's it. You'll be landed on something like this. So now you can manage your member cluster. Notice that I'm logged in via this. So I'm logged in via the host, and I'll be able to manage my member as many as I add over here. So you don't have to maintain like multiple accounts. Similarly, if I go to host cluster or member cluster, since this is already logged into host, I'll go into member, no problem. And here you can find all kinds of stuff: CPU usage, memory usage, cluster nodes. As you can see, nodes running individually. You can go into this, right? You can see sections over here, and you can check out some of the pods that are running over here as well. Monitoring, which I'm sure Femin will talk about. You can see some nice little dashboards that are available over here. A bunch of things are available over here. Workloads and configurations, CRDs and stuff. We already looked into it. Volumes can be managed. Monitoring, alerting, cluster status, settings. As you can see, API server monitoring, scheduler monitoring. All bunch of things are available over here. Amazing. So lots to dive into. We will look at monitoring stuff now. There's a question by Rishabh. Can we install plugins to Jenkins in it? Femin?
Can be install Jenkins in it. Yeah, actually, it has a Cubesphere DevOps system, which is based on Jenkins. So you can enable Cubesphere DevOps to install Jenkins, or it can also support you to replace it with your existing Jenkins system as the underlying engine of Cubesphere DevOps. Yeah, I think we will walk you through the process of how to enable Cubesphere DevOps and how to create CI/CD pipelines across multiple Kubernetes clusters in the following events. Yeah.
Amazing. And in the YouTube video, I'll make sure I link some useful resources for you to follow as well. There's one more question we got. How is this? Can you maybe compare it with something like Rancher?
This is a good question. Actually, Rancher is much mature than us since this project has been founded around 8 or 9 years. I remember. Yeah. Actually, I think the destination, or we say the position of these two products are a little bit different. Cubesphere is designed for the developers and especially for the multi-tenancy and multi-class management. And it is application-centric platform, but Rancher is designed for the IT administrators. So all of those design and concepts are a little bit native in Rancher. So I think, in my personal opinion, Rancher is much like a native Kubernetes dashboard with integration with some native third-party applications, Grafana, Prometheus, and other ecosystem tools. But you need to jump into those systems and the web interface to manipulate them and implement those features. But within Cubesphere, everything works like a unified control plane. So you don't need to you don't need to install them manually. You can have them, you just need to enable them by yourself. And all of things are integrated into a single unified management console. Yeah, everything works like a consistent product instead of some multiple projects. Yeah, and I will show you with some live demo later.
Awesome. That was it about my presentation. Thanks for answering all the questions. The stage is yours. I'll give you screen share access. 1 second. You can share screen now, and we can take it away. Folks, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A section, and we'll make sure we answer those live. Are you able to share screen?
Yeah, I could share my screen and give any presentations. Let me share it. Can you see it?
Yeah, it's visible. Yep.
Okay, so it's my turn, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, thanks, Kuna. Actually, I was really excited that I see Kuna has been presented the Cubesphere very well and give a good presentation around the Kubernetes multi-cluster management and the basic project introduction to Cubesphere. Actually, all of those presentations are presented from a Kubernetes practitioner or a IT administrator, since all of those things are around Kubernetes infrastructure management with a cluster management. So I will give some live demos and introductions from a developer perspective. So I will show you how to deploy an application across multiple Kubernetes cluster and how to build observability such as logging, monitoring, and auditing logs around Kubernetes. So before we get started, I think I need to give any history and basic introduction about Cubesphere. For example, why we initiate and funded this project around 4 years ago, and what will be added in this project in the next releases, and the roadmap of Cubesphere. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the QA box, okay? Since Kuna has introduced Cubesphere, so I will skip it. And Cubesphere is also available on Civo Marketplace that Kuna has shared it already. I think this is a issue that reported from Cubesphere KSAPS server. So I will help you to solve it after this meeting. since you have to troubleshoot it while the case installer logs, so you can try to retrieve the logs while the kubectl command and to see what's going on there. So you might need to troubleshoot it by yourself right now, but I will help you to solve it after this meeting.
I believe one more thing to mention is that there's an awesome Slack channel for Cubesphere as well that you can join. So make sure you do that. You can find the link on the website, or I can share it here as well. And you can ask all your questions post-meeting over there as well.
Yeah, sure. Actually, this is a general architecture of Cubesphere. It has provided some typical typical features such as service mesh, CI/CD, application lifecycle management, observability, and security and authentication management. Cubespheres can be installed on the existing Kubernetes cluster, for example, Civo Kubernetes cluster on your own premises Kubernetes cluster. By the way, if you are a new beginner for Kubernetes, it also helps you to provision a brand new Kubernetes cluster via KubeKey, an open source cluster management and installation tool that open sourced by our team. So you can install Cubesphere on any kinds of infrastructures, including Kubernetes or VM virtual machines or bare metals. Okay. This is an overview of the ecosystem tool that have been included in Cubesphere. All of those software or cloud native tools can be enabled and installed automatically by Cubesphere case installer. So you just need to modify the the class configuration that Kunal has introduced before. And going forward, we will simplify this process and make all of this in a graphical user panel. So going forward, all of those add-ons could be installed from the application store in Cubesphere. Right now, you can enable them via the kubectl commands or the class configuration. Yeah. So from the top layer, you can see from the application management to the underlying orchestration and container engine, all of those ecosystem tools could be installed and enabled in Cubesphere. Actually, this is the roadmap of Cubesphere. This project has been founded around 4 years ago, and it has published the first release in 2018. So right now we have released around 10 versions. So it has been a mature project and has been adopted by thousands of enterprises in China and all around the world, especially in some financial enterprises such as banking and insurance enterprises. I think the most remarkable release is 4.0 that we are going to release in the second half of this year. In this release, we are going to provide an open and pluggable framework. We can also call an architecture. Yeah, this is an important release till now, since it has provided an open architecture that allows third-party applications can be integrated, and all of those software could be developed by yourself or extended by any teams. The most important thing is that all of those software can follow with a consistent framework, and all of those user experience and user interface are looking quite consistent with Cubesphere itself. So all of those user experience are consistent with Cubesphere, and we are also developing an open source serverless, or we say fast management platform, which name is Open Function, that has also accepted by CNCF as a CNCF Sandbox project last week. So we're also planning to integrate the serverless management platform in Cubesphere at 4.0. Before we initiated this project, we have did a lot of investigation works, and we also see there are a lot of existing tools that are solving those problems. As for the challenges and pain points that when people using Kubernetes in production, we can easily find the complexity has been the most biggest problem that when we adopt Kubernetes. This is the survey from the CNCF survey 2020. So as you can find that complexity occupies the highest portion in this diagram. So before we funded this project, we want to make developers' life much easier, especially for the developers who want to deploy applications on Kubernetes. So we, when it talks to the mission and the vision of Cubesphere, we want to decrease the learning curve of Kubernetes and making the application deployment and management quite easier. Apart from that, I think the security, storage, and monitoring has also been huge problems among Kubernetes management. So it has provided some features such as observability, including alerting, monitoring, and logging in some releases. Okay, let's go ahead. This is also some pain points that we see when people leveraging Kubernetes in production. So I'm not sure, have you everyone watched the movie, and do you know the Jackie Chan, a famous Chinese Kung Fu superstar? He has also been quite famous around the world. And this is a classical emotion from Jackie Chan. So I think people may feel the same feeling when they manage Kubernetes cluster, especially a large-scale Kubernetes cluster in production. They might have the challenges around high learning curve, Kubernetes cluster bootstrapping, application lifecycle management, as well as security and multi-tenancy. So in order to solve all of those challenges, we funded this project and added some features and grow it with our users and contributors. Already we see there are a lot of existing tools such as Kibana, Elasticsearch, Kubernetes Dashboard, Istio, Harbor, and SonarQube that have been solved those different kinds of issues in Kubernetes. For example, Elasticsearch ELK stack has been the de facto of Kubernetes logging management in this area for many years. And Prometheus and Grafana has been the most popular monitoring tool in this domain. Actually, we don't redevelop those tools in Cubesphere. We just integrate it and make it much easy of use in Cubesphere. All right. Let me give a general comparison to Kubernetes and Cubesphere. I would say Cubesphere stands on the huge giant of Kubernetes and some other ecosystem tools, but Cubesphere has did a lot of strengths and enhancements based on Kubernetes. For example, as for the installation, I have mentioned that we have an open source tool, kubekey, which is developed based on kubeadmin. It has a command line tool that you can use to create a fresh Kubernetes cluster with Cubesphere via a single command. Yeah, so it has a extremely simple user experience. So it also provides both online and offline installation methods. So as for the user interface, I think this part has been acknowledged by a lot of users, since it has a good and very neat user interface that provides Wizard Web UI. As for the multi-tenancy and security, Cubesphere has been developed a concept, and it has designed a multi-tenancy management framework based on Kubernetes, which is Workspace, that I will demonstrate it later. It is also compatible with the existing Kubernetes RBAC policies, and it also provides network policy management and OAuth and LDAP integration. As for the application management, CI/CD, and service mesh, those features are not provided by Kubernetes natively. So Cubesphere are also included all of those features out of the box. So you just need to enable them via the kubectl command or the web interface. Apart from Cubesphere itself, we are also developing and polishing some ecosystem tools, and all of them have been accepted by the upstream community and CNCF. As for the OpenELB, formerly named as PortLB, which is an open source load balancer designed for bare metal and on-premises Kubernetes cluster. So this project implemented by physical switches and uses BGP and ECMP to achieve the best performance and high availability for exposing the Kubernetes services in the on-premises cluster. If you are running your Kubernetes cluster on public cloud, such as Civo Cloud, you will not need this project. But when you are going to deploy your cluster in your data center or in, for example, your local machines, OpenELB is quite useful. I see there is a new question. Any special provision in Cubesphere?
There's one,
yeah. GitLab instance. Yeah, we are going to support GitLab as the underlying engine for Cubesphere DevOps. And so far, we have supported Argo CD in the next release. I think going forward, GitLab could be an optional CI/CD engine for Cubesphere. This is a good requirement. I think it has been already listed in our roadmap. Okay. As for the Fluent-based operator, now it has been renamed to Fluent operator. It is used for Kubernetes. It is used for deployment of Fluent-based and Fluentd. It has provided the lifecycle management for Fluent-based and Fluentd to famous open source logging management tool in the CNCF. And it also provides great flexibility in building logging layer based on Fluent-based and Fluentd. I will also showing the general architecture and the walkthrough of Fluent operator later. I think KubeKey has been mentioned by myself a lot of times, so you can check out this project from Cubesphere.io, and you can find the project's introduction and GitHub from our website. Okay, KubeEye is aiming to detect various problems on Kubernetes. It is an troubleshooting tool for you to debug the application misconfiguration and unhealthy cluster components and node problems. So if you want to troubleshoot your security policies and your cluster health, you can check it via KubeEye. And OpenFunction has also mentioned earlier, it is an CNCF sandbox project aiming to provide the function as a service based on Kubernetes. So you just need to write your source code and functions. So OpenFunction will help you to build the images from source code. And finally, it will build the easy to run Docker images or any container compatible images in Kubernetes. So you don't need to consider about the underlying runtime and the infrastructure. Maybe this project will be included in the following webinars with Kunal. Yeah. Okay. As we mentioned earlier, and Kunal has also demonstrated the multi-class management, I would like to explain why the multi-class management matters and why you need it. Similarly, we have also did some investigations around the multi-class management before. We have drawn the conclusion that around more than 70% of users that have adopted multiple Kubernetes clusters in their production, they might use those Kubernetes clusters for different purposes. For example, they want to separate different applications and environments. For example, some teams has development, testing, or the production cluster. So this is a good use case when people want to isolate different environments for different applications. Apart from that, we also see the multi-cloud management has also been a new trend for those enterprises, especially for those biggest enterprises, since they don't want to be locked in by those cloud providers. And they also want to provide the high availability among different cloud providers. So if one cloud provider down, they have optional and redundancy for the applications. So it can be scaling to other cloud providers quite easily. Apart from the multi-cloud and isolation environment, we also see especially in the big company, we have different teams to use a single Kubernetes cluster or multiple Kubernetes cluster, and we have different teams such as testing, DevOps, and IT administrators teams. So they want to grant different permissions and different resources to different teams and members. So considering business isolation, multi-tenancy and security have been considered in this kind of scenario. And last but not least, the geographic redundancy has also been considered in this kind of scenario. So especially in the financial industry, they have to consider and make sure their application are active, and it can be accessed all the time. So that means those teams have to provide their applications across multidimensional high availability across different regions, available zones, and different Kubernetes clusters. We always see this kind of requirements among the industries such as banking, insurance, and finance, as well as the live stream and the online shopping industry. Yeah. So according to all of those requirements and pain points from Kubernetes multi-cluster management, we added the multi-cluster management feature in Cubesphere, and now it has support unified resource management, application distribution, cross-cluster CI/CD in Cubesphere. So whatever you are using, AWS, Civo Cloud, or you are managing your Kubernetes cluster in your local machine and data center, you can use Cubesphere as an unified control plane to import all of those Kubernetes cluster in Cubesphere and manage them with ease. It allows you to propagate your applications across different Kubernetes cluster and multi-cloud. So I will show you a quite simple demo from a developer perspective. I will deploy an web application across Civo Cloud, across Civo Kubernetes cluster, and among two different Kubernetes clusters. Okay, as Kunal has mentioned before, Cubesphere multi-cluster management is built on the Kubernetes Federation. We can also call it KubeFed. And this is Kubernetes Federation v2 in Cubesphere. So it has host cluster and member cluster. So all of those authentications and multi-tenancy management has been redesigned and refactored in Cubesphere. So it has provided a quite ease of use control plane for users and IT administrators. You don't need to learn about the basic concepts of Kubernetes Federation. So what is federated resources and how to manage them with yourself. So all of those resources have been integrated and simplified in Cubesphere. So the general architecture are shown as this diagram. So you can create a workspace and grant the permission to different Kubernetes cluster and invite different teams and members to the platform and different Kubernetes cluster. Yeah, you can invite collaborators to join your Kubernetes cluster and grant some permissions such as deploy applications and application lifecycle management. This diagram has also been demonstrated by Kunal at the beginning of this webinar, so I will not deep dive into it. So before we showing the live demo of Kubernetes multi-cluster and application deployment, I will demonstrate how the multi-tenancy works in Cubesphere. Actually, the workspace is the smallest unit in Cubesphere multi-tenancy mechanism. So it is used to manage multiple Kubernetes namespace. As you know, Workspace is not involved in the native Kubernetes cluster. So this is a concept in Cubesphere, which is used to manage different namespace and different Kubernetes clusters, and also associated with the different roles and members. So you can create a workspace before you deploy your application to multiple Kubernetes clusters. This is also a very detailed documentation in Cubesphere website. So if you want to know more about the Kubernetes multi-tenancy in Cubesphere, you can go through this documentation and see the biggest challenges in Kubernetes multi-tenancy and how we design the concept of Kubernetes multi-tenancy in Cubesphere. Actually, we did a lot of works in the among the Kubernetes logistic management and the physical isolation for the multi-tenancy management. So you can go through this documentation and to see what has been illustrated in this document. Actually, we also did some work among the authentication and authorization around the multi-tenancy management, as we need to manage different teams and members across different workspaces and different Kubernetes clusters. So if you want to deep dive into it, you can have a look at this diagram. It has the explanation to KS console and KS API server and how they work with the authentication and authorization. Okay, let's jump into the live demo. I think talking is cheap. Let's show you a live demo of how to create a workspace and how to deploy an multi-cluster application to multiple Kubernetes cluster on Civo Cloud. All right, as we have already initiated 2 Kubernetes clusters on Civo Kubernetes Cloud, and Kunal has also demonstrated this part already at the beginning of this webinar, so I will not demonstrate it again. So if you want to try it yourself, you just need to register a new account on Civo Cloud. So I will jump into the control plane of Cubesphere and show you how to deploy an application among them. Okay. Yeah, we got a Cubesphere 3.2. This is the latest version of Cubesphere. And in this month, we are going to release a new version for Cubesphere, which has integrated Argo CD in its DevOps system. So for this Kubernetes, for this Cubesphere container platform, we have already imported 2 clusters. The first one is host cluster, which is a control plane of the multi-cluster management. So the second one is member cluster, which allows you to deploy your applications on the member cluster, and this cluster is used to run your business workloads. Okay, let's get started. So before we deploy an application among them, we can create a workspace, which is the basic concept of Cubesphere multi-tenancy management.
Maybe like brief just about multi-tenancy as well for folks who may be asking. See a few folks.
Okay.
Who are, yeah.
Yeah, we can waiting for a while. I thought Kuna might miss the multi-tenancy and workspace design in Cubesphere in your first episode. So I will deep dive into this part in this webinar.
Awesome, let's do it.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah, I think this workspace design is not quite obvious in the current release. So we will polish it and make it much obvious and easy to use in the next release. Yeah.
I believe we can move forward.
Okay. Assume there is any no issues or questions about the Kubernetes multi-tenancy in Cubesphere. I could give an example for this design. So imagine you have different teams and departments in your company. For example, you have DevOps teams and testing and for example, and development teams. Yeah. They want to manage their different, they want to manage their resources among different namespace or different, CI/CD pipelines. So, but they just want to make sure their resources are only visible to their teams internally. So in this kind of scenario, you can create workspace and share resources with different teams, and you can invite different departments or different organizations in different, workspaces in Cubesphere. So Cubesphere is designed for multi-tenant management. So this is quite important for you to understand. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and create a new workspace. We can call it Civo webinar. Civo Cloud. Yeah, we can associate this workspace and add these two Kubernetes clusters within this workspace. All right, as we have explained before, under the workspace, we can create multiple Kubernetes namespaces. We have abstracted into projects in Cubesphere. And we can also create the DevOps project, which is the Jenkins pipeline that you can create it here. Yeah. You can also import your Helm repository here. So you can add your Helm repository and it will be displayed in the App Store and application template. So in this demo, I will show you how to create a multi-cluster project and deploy a multi-cluster application among two Kubernetes cluster. You can call it application testing. And we can associate it with two Kubernetes cluster, the host and the member cluster. Click OK. So now we have created this multi-cluster project. And next, as a developer, maybe you want to deploy application in this project and distribute it to multiple Kubernetes clusters. So we can create a application here. We can call it applications testing. So here we can create a stateless service and associate it with this project. Application testing, give it a name. And next, we can actually here, we can choose to scale it to multiple replicas in order to make sure it is high availability among different Kubernetes cluster. So let's give 3 here and give 2 in member cluster. Actually, you can point a container image here. So as we have already developed an web application, and it calls cluster. I remember the name is cluster demo. Not sure if it is. Actually, we can use here to search this image, class demo. Wait 4 seconds. Yeah, actually, we developed a web app, and the name is class demo. You can choose it and use v1. I think it could be searched in this. Okay, it comes, and we can use the default port for this web application. All right, we can save it and go ahead. This is the persistent volume settings. Since this is a stateless application, so you can skip it. And you can skip it. So as for the environment variables, we want to give an environment variable here. For example, we can call it db cluster, which will be displayed on the web application web interface. You can call it host. As for the member cluster, we can do these similar steps. db cluster, and we can call it member. So this value will be displayed on the web application. So I will show you later. Okay, everything looks fine. So you can save it and create this application. Actually, we can define the router. Actually, this is the Kubernetes ingress in our project. So we can give a domain name, which can be accessed in our browser or outside the cluster. For example, we can give apps. We can give a host apps testing.io, and we can associate with the application testing service. And click OK. And we can do the similar step for the member cluster. You can give it a domain name, member, and apps testing.io. This is similar with the last step. We can click OK to save it, and finally click create button to complete it. So at this point, you will find those 2 applications have been running on these 2 Kubernetes clusters, and it is still updating and putting the Docker image in those different Kubernetes clusters. So please wait for seconds. So yeah, when it display the green status, that means it has been successfully running on those Kubernetes clusters. Yeah. So we can see we can join to the service detail page. So you will find the applications have been propagated with different replicas on these 2 Kubernetes clusters. The first one is host cluster. It has been run 3 replicas on it, and the second one is member cluster with 2 replicas on it. So in this way, your application have been achieved with the high availability natively. So you don't need to worry about if one application is down in the host cluster, since it will be rescheduled to the second cluster. So at this point, if you want to access it outside the cluster. So you can try it with the internal domain name. We can also call it DNS name. You can also access it via your browser. So before we access it, we can verify it on our web kubectl, and to see if this service could be accessed internally. Okay, try to access it with its port. Yeah, we can see the HTML but I think this is not quite intuitive in the web kubectl, so we can try to access it while the domain name in our browser. So let's give it, you can try it host.appstesting.io. Wait for a while. I think it should be come. Actually, maybe this domain has been blocked by my network provider, by my internet provider. I'm not sure. Okay. Unfortunately, I think this domain name is not certified by the certified authority. So I think this has been, the domain name has been blocked by my internet provider. Actually, we can try to access it while my Kubernetes cluster itself. We can query it. So if you want to access this domain, you might need to add the DNS resolution in your etc configuration. So I don't have, I have not configured it from my side. So if you want to access it, you can try to configure it in your local machine. Okay, we can go to the routers and to see if the external IP address works. Yeah, actually, I can try to configure it from my local machine. Please wait for seconds. Oops. I think I missed a character here. All right, I think this demo works successfully. As you can see, the web application has been deployed in my host cluster. As you can see, the variable that we defined in the previous step, you can see the host displayed on our web application. This is defined in the application deployment step. Yeah. So similarly, it could be accessed in the member.applications.testing.io, since I didn't configure it in my local machine. So if you want to access it, you can try it in your desktop. This is quite similar with the host cluster management. Yeah. So yeah, we have completed the first demo of multi-cluster application deployment. Yeah, and we have propagated the replicas of a web application to 2 different Kubernetes cluster on Civo Cloud. So if you want to try it, there's also a document on our website. You can check out it on Cubesphere.io. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the to my slide. Yeah, actually, I have demonstrated how to deploy a multi-cluster application on multiple Kubernetes clusters, which has shows the final results in our browser. So go ahead, I will discover and walk you through the observability within Cubesphere. As you know, from different multi-dimensional resources such as cluster, node, application, pod, containers, namespaces, and Kubernetes components. All of those resources will omit the Kubernetes logs and metrics every day. So if you want to troubleshoot and debug what's going on and what happens in those components or applications, you might need to build your own observability system based on your Kubernetes. So you might retrieve the metrics, logs, events, audit logs, and alert messages for those indicators. There are also some mature tools that you can use to manage and retrieve those logs and data among Kubernetes clusters. For example, Prometheus, Fluentbit, Elasticsearch, Firebit, and Fluentd. I think the biggest challenge is how to collect those metrics and logs and data in a single Kubernetes cluster or even multiple Kubernetes cluster and display them and make it visible to different teams. This is the biggest challenge when you want to build multi-tenancy among Kubernetes cluster. Yeah. So according to this challenge and pain point, we are developing and providing the feature, the observability feature on Kubernetes. Yeah. As the monitoring part is quite obvious and easy to understand, and Kunal has also showcased the cluster monitoring in Cubesphere. So I will focus and concentrate on the logging management. Before we introducing logging, I think we might need to consider how the logging generates and where they come from. Actually, we have different types of logging in Kubernetes and our application every day. For example, as for the application logs, it might have generated from the Docker containers and our application. So it will generate the files, the file type of logging and data, and it will be shipped to the send out and send arrow or write into a file. So in this way, we can collect those data from the file or from the send out with a logging tool such as Fluentd and Fluentbit. As for the Kubernetes components itself, it has multiple components such as Kube API server, Kube scheduler, and Kube proxy. It also generates a huge amount of logs every day. So in case you want to troubleshoot what's going on and happens in your Kubernetes cluster, you might need to collect those Kubernetes component logs and store them in your Elasticsearch. So this is also important to monitoring and retrieve those logs in a storage. Yeah. Apart from the Kubernetes itself, actually, if you want to trace and look back who did which actions in your cluster and when did this happens, you might need to look back at Kubernetes events and auditing logs. So every Kubernetes event, such as scheduling a pod or deleting a pod, or you create a new deployment, all of those actions and events will be recorded by the Kubernetes API server. Yeah. These logs help you to trace back the Kubernetes resources state, and the Kubernetes audit logs will help you to trace what happens in your Kubernetes cluster and who did which actions in your Kubernetes cluster. This is quite important when your enterprise is doing the compliance and security check. Okay, this is also an easy to understand blog on our website, so you can check out it from this domain. Okay, yeah, we see how it's working, automatically fixed. Oh, that's fortunate, and I see that this guest has fixed this issue and it is automatically fixed. I think maybe your cluster is still under installing at the beginning of this webinar. So I think this installation has just completed. You can enjoy your journey with Cubesphere.
Does take a few minutes. That's why you can check the logs.
Actually, we are simplify the installation process and makes the installation time much short, since it relies on the Ansible scripts. So we are removing the Ansible from our installation script and the process. So I think it could be refined in the future release. Okay. When it comes to the challenges of logging in Kubernetes, actually we see the logs come from different data sources and different data formats. For example, we have logs generated from our system and Kubernetes cluster, and it has also generated from the, for example, our Apache web server or our browser. Yeah, all of those logs are in different data formats and different resources. And for example, different teams have also requirements on the log collection. For example, they want to make the log collector much lightweight and make the data collecting in a secure and resilient way. Finally, if you want to store your logs and data in different destinations, so it has multiple outputs. For example, we can store our data and logs in MongoDB, Hadoop, Elasticsearch, S3, and so on. So all of those challenges have been quite commonly in enterprises, especially in the real use cases. So according to those challenges, we developed an open source Fluent operator, which is used to facilitate the management of FluentD and FluentBit. As you know, FluentBit and FluentD are quite popular in the logging management domain, which is used to collect and forward the logs from different sources to different destinations. But you know, there are a lot of challenges and shortcomings in FluentBit and FluentD. For example, the dynamic reloading is not supported in FluentBit. If you want to manage your, if you want to modify your configuration via config map, you need to restart the FluentBit pod every time. So Fluent operator allows you to dynamically manage your FluentBit and FluentD without reloading and restart your pod. Actually, Fluent operator also provide the management and rich plugins with FluentBit and FluentD. Meantime, Cubesphere also integrates Fluent operator in its logging system. So I will show you how to search the logs via Cubesphere logging system. By the way, Fluent operator has also been accepted by the upstream Fluent community. So you will find this project from the Fluent organization in GitHub. Yeah. Okay, this is the Cubesphere logging system. It has provided the log searching console and the log collectors that it enables you to add new log collectors such as Elasticsearch, Kafka, FluentD, and S3. This is the logging console of Cubesphere, as you can see from the Cubesphere container platform. Where's my console? So yeah, we have a toolbox that integrates all of those features among the observability management. For example, log search, event search, and auditing log search. So you can click log search and drill into it. You can pick up a period and to see what's going on there. So you will find the logs have been stored in the Elasticsearch, and you can trace from the historical logs, and you can drill into it and to see what's going on in this part and in this project. You can also drill into its path and to see the container logs. Yeah, this is quite useful when you want to trace back and to see what's going on in your application and workloads. Okay, let's go ahead. Actually, we have demonstrated the Cubesphere logging system. Actually, how we implemented this feature within Cubesphere, we use Fluentbit running on each node with demo set, Fluentbit demo set, and which used to retrieve the logs from the standard out in each node. And then the Fluent operator will retrieve those logs and send them to the Elasticsearch. And while the Cubesphere logging console and through the Cubesphere API server, all of those logs will be visualized and showing on Cubesphere console, which is similar to the Kibana, but you don't need to build the Kibana by yourself since it has been integrated into Cubesphere console. Okay, this is the cluster status monitoring. Similarly, you can also create your own Kubernetes monitoring dashboard and your application monitoring dashboard by yourself, since it has a custom monitoring dashboard here. But due to the time is limited, I will not show you how to monitor your application via Cubesphere. So you can check out the documentation on our website. This is the event console. Let me open an event console for, yeah. This is the historical events that have been collected by Cubesphere, and we can choose which cluster to watch. Actually, you can search the events via different messages, workspace, or project. Similarly, we can pick a period and jump into it. So yeah, we find some warning events that are omitted by the kube system. So we can jump into it. And you can see the detailed metadata that omitted from this part. So you will find the source event is from the Kubernetes component, and you can see the type is warning. So you can, you might need to troubleshoot the Kubernetes and to see what's going on there. And it also promotes the error message that the readiness prop is failed. So this is quite useful if you find that there is some troublesome or misconfiguration in your Kubernetes cluster. So you might need to troubleshoot it if you are a IT administrator. Similarly, I think the auditing log is also the same with the previous steps. So you can click here and you can search it while the keyword or while different resources types. Yeah, I think this is quite similar with the Kubernetes event search. So I will not showing it again. Yeah. So you will find the auditing log source and who did this action in your project. For example, you will find the administrator that has updated the Cubesphere project and its gateway in the system workspace at this time. So I think this is quite useful for you to do the compliance and trace who did which actions in your cluster. All right. Due to the time is limited, I will not demonstrate how the CI/CD workflow works in Cubesphere, but I see there are some folks that are asking how to integrate and use Jenkins in Cubesphere. Actually, Cubesphere is integrated Jenkins as its CI/CD engine, as you can see from this CI/CD workflow, and you will see the Jenkins and SonarQube in this CI/CD workflow. But I think this could be provided in the future webinars if you want. Yeah. This is a screenshot of how to create a graphical pipeline within Cubesphere. I think this is all for my demonstration. Kunal.
Amazing. Thanks a lot for sharing, Femin. Really appreciate it. Stop screen sharing now.
Yeah, I will stop sharing it.
Amazing. And see, any more questions? I believe that is because we answered most of those like during the session, which is good. Yeah, that was pretty much about it. And you'll be able to see the recordings of individual talks, both mine and Femin's. I'll upload it, I'll edit it, make it look real nice, and it will be edited on YouTube as individual talks, so you can watch it later on. We'll share some like amazing blogs that you can find in the documentation as well. As a reminder, please also you can join the Cubesphere Slack channel, and there you can directly engage with the community members, give your feedback, ask your questions. If you're getting stuck somewhere, you can definitely join. And thanks for the shout out, people giving shout out in the chat. Thanks for joining, appreciate it. And Fiman, do you have any closing remarks?
Actually, I shared a document link in our chat box and demonstrate how to install Cubesphere on Civo Kubernetes cluster. And this is quite similar if you are using other Kubernetes distribution, for example, K3s or Minikube or any other on-premises Kubernetes cluster. You can check out this link and find some resources on our website. Yeah.
Yeah, website is great. You can go through the documentation, and you get stuck somewhere, the Slack channel is always there to help you folks in the Slack channel. Amazing. Well, thanks for joining everyone, and really appreciate you all giving the time. We'll see you in the next one, and this one will be uploaded so you can watch it later on. I've already seen a lot of folks have shared it, on socials already. So appreciate you all giving the shout out. But yeah, thanks for joining everyone. See you in the next one. Bye.